Jai Hind viewers, we welcome you back to another interview from MRO Digest forums. Today, we have the privilege of talking to our patron, Lieutenant General Dr. N.B. Singh. General N.B. Singh served as Director General of Corps of Electronics and Mechanical Engineers, Director General Information Systems, and was a founding member of the Armed Forces Tribunal, Jabalpur. He specializes in armored fighting vehicles and played a key role in the design and development of bulletproof vehicle Takshak, Arjun armored recovery vehicle, and made a significant contribution in the development of the Dhanush gun system. He has undergone specialized training in Germany on off-highway vehicles and served in Moscow as military attaché technical. Today we are discussing an article which has been written recently by General N.B. Singh. The article appeared in Indian Defense Review. It is titled Strategic Readiness, Revisiting Close and Deep Engineering Support. The link to the article is there in the show notes below, and you're welcome to go to the article. Today, we will be discussing about what has been written in this article by General N.B. Singh. Sir, the first question I may ask you is that what is implicit by the term strategic readiness in general terms, and specifically with respect to the field of defense in which you have written your article, General N.B. sir?
Yeah, Jai Hind, the stage. Thank you for getting me over once again. And, this article I wrote basically because I feel that, with the way things are moving forward with increasing entropy everywhere, with the climate change, what we are going to see is, a large number of disruptions in the years ahead. One hopes that doesn't happen. But if it does, then I think nations have to be prepared to handle it with a long-term view. So strategic readiness in general terms is basically the enduring ability of a nation or any organization, to create the staying power, the endurance, the resilience, the depth to withstand any adverse event, any adverse situation, and to come out as a winner in that. Now, these events and situations can be any kind. It can be internal disturbances, internal strife, can be external aggression, it can be a natural calamity, it can be a man-made adversity, like nuclear power plant leak and disruption of your infrastructure, etc. So in all these adverse situations, there is a certain amount of capability and a capacity which is required to address these. Otherwise, you will end up moving from one crisis to another. Now, how effectively and how quickly such adverse situations get handled by any organization or by a country indicates the level of strategic readiness. Uh, Firstly, it provides the people of the country a kind of a strategic assurance that, okay, we are in a country where generally things will not go wrong, but if something goes wrong, then we have the wherewithal to, handle it. Uh, Most of it by our own capabilities and maybe with a certain amount of external help. Uh, and also it will create a kind of a strategic influence amongst other nations who will also feel that, yes, here is a country whom we can rely as a partner. In military terms, we can say that it is the capacity or capability of any military, once again, to handle external aggression, which is not of its own doing, which possibly where the country has suffered a kind of a, or taken totally by surprise, to handle it effectively, have the resilience and the staying power, particularly when you are facing a stronger adversity, to face it and to ensure that the outcomes of this conflict are in favor of you, in your favor, or in the favor of people of your country. So basically, it means in military terms to be prepared for the long haul and to face this adverse situation and come out a winner in this crisis. Now, it has got many dimensions to it. I have, of course, talked about sustainment readiness, but strategic readiness actually encompasses a lot of other dimensions. Some of these are operational effectiveness, where basically it indicates the capability of any military, how effective it is to deal with the adversary and how skillful it is in ensuring that the military operations get controlled by it and not they do not end up as reacting to those kind of situations. Second is, of course, military effectiveness, where we talk about how effective your fighting forces in terms of personal readiness and system readiness. Then we have the issue of structural readiness. How quickly, after being surprised, you are able to get your act together, both in the military field and the civilian field, to face that challenge. You have sustainment readiness, which I'll be talking about. You have aspects like overall resilience. What is the overall resilience of the nation to withstand this external aggression and to ensure that the course of war or the course of the battle proceeds in a manner in which you want it to proceed, rather than getting repeatedly surprised and after getting surprised, not being able to react to it. So we have numerous examples of this in the past and also right now, whatever is happening all over the world. The fact remains that if you are forewarned, you are forearmed, and then possibly you will be able to handle the situation effectively. So that, in general terms, is what strategic readiness is all about. I will say it is overall resilience or staying power of a country to face adverse situations and adverse outcomes.
Thank you very much for that, sir. You have started with the adverse effects on platforms with age, usage, and deployment, and explained the importance of in-theater forced regeneration. Could you elaborate on that, sir?
Yeah, you see, I have deliberately chosen this subject of sustainment readiness because my experience has been that, generally this uh, very important area is not given the required amount of attention which it normally should be provided. We everybody feels that hollowness indicates lack of modernization, lack of new acquisitions. My view is different. I feel that whenever you have acquired a major system, it comes with a certain amount of capability and engineering life. And it is very important to see that this capability, which I call it as equipment capability or engineering life, is sustained throughout the period this particular platform is with you in service. You know, I have given out in the article certain graphs which indicate that how, with passage of time, as equipment ages, as technology becomes obsolete, also depending upon where it is deployed. You see, if you take the example of this current war, in that most of the equipment, you know, was was kept in the warehouses. Now, if you have kept the equipment in warehouses and duly mothballed and preserved, and after that you are using it, and you have seen the state of how many of them failed en route, and what are the kind of that 60-mile that column which was stalled on the outskirts of Kiev. So if reserved and mothballed equipment can perform uh, in such a manner where its capabilities get degraded, the other systems, if you look at it, those which are continuously deployed in very harsh terrains, be it deserts or in our context, super high altitudes, you will find that the degradation will continue to take place. Now, in this graph which you were showing, you will find that with the passage of time and with usage, most of the systems undergo deployment. We generally get influenced by, the mechanical systems, uh, like the chassis or possibly the running gear, where you find, basically because you do continuous replacements there, you find that, the 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 failures are less. They are going down with passage of time. But other systems where you generally do small amount of maintenance and uh, maybe some kind of running repairs, you find that with passage of time, all of them tend to show up more failures. And that is the reason why certain schedules have been built in, that okay, this is what you're supposed to do in technical maintenance, this is what you're supposed to do in medium refit, this is what you're supposed to do in base refit. And most modern armies will like to adhere to it. It is capital intensive, it requires money, it requires painstaking effort, which most militaries, because of budgetary constraints, are possibly not in a position to commit. But the result of that is what was seen here. I mean, today, if you see in this war in Ukraine, either sides are finding it very difficult to provide the military hardware which is required to prosecute the operations, be it Russia or be it Ukraine, where the Western world is providing them most of the platforms. And the platforms which are arriving there, as per reports, are becoming faulty very frequently, and there is a demand for large amount of resources to rectify them. So I feel that readiness in our context, uh, people need to understand that it is a complex issue. It is something which cannot be just handled at a black box level, the way we are handling by people who generally don't understand the complexities and are not in a position to even, question the agencies who are carrying out these kind of, you know, these kind of sustainment efforts, question them as to why, what kind of capability upgradation you have done after we have spent so much of money. So it's a complex issue. Readiness also is not a constant factor. We must understand that with passage of time, readiness levels will fall, and therefore it requires a repeated injection of resources to see that readiness is maintained at a certain level. Sadly, in our military, there is hardly any metrics to measure readiness other than the plain garage availability. So you find at most places, people are generally content with, okay, what is the total availability? So somebody says we are authorized so many and we are holding so many. Okay, so it is the availability state is 95% or 99%. And with that, the whole story ends. Nobody is trying to drill down deep and trying to find out that, look, out of these, how many are mission capable, and if mission capable, what is their ability? How far can they run? How far can they jump? This is something which has to be measured. Otherwise, the day the requirement comes, you will find that a gun system which is required to, give you about 400, 500 rounds before a kind of a stoppage takes place, ends up giving you just maybe 10, 20, 30 rounds. And what do you do then? So it's a very important issue which generally finds very few takers in the military. And it is our job to see that this the importance of this is restored, regained, and we have to put across to the people handling these affairs that this will be the adverse outcome in case you do not. And I think this war has given you a great opportunity to reinforce this point once again, the important issue of sustaining platforms, of creating MRO infrastructure which can look after these platforms.
Thank you for that, sir. Moving forward, sir, you have emphasized the importance of tech competence to enhance combat effectiveness or to create resilience during ops. How do you think this can be addressed in our context?
Yeah, I'll first, in the article, I have initially given a small subheading, which is titled "The Role of Technical Competence," and where I have actually recounted some incidents, both from previous wars as well as the current war, how technical competence is creating a battle-winning situation for either sides. Now, if you look at it, if you start from the initial 1973 Yom Kippur War, we all know, we have read that how, that Egyptians had prepared and planned for that operation, and how they were able to create a strategic surprise for the Israelis. If you look at preparations, and if you read various analyses which have come out, some of them very recently, maybe last 3-4 years back, they have shown how Egyptian gunners, particularly those handling the ATGMs, the Malutka missiles, they had fired up to 25 missiles per day to hone their skills and spent hours on simulators. Similarly, their engineers had repeatedly practiced this, the crossing over the Suez Canal, repeatedly, laying out the bridges and carrying out the rehearsals. Their ASC had the logisticians had worked out how exactly they'll be moving fuel across the Suez Canal. So all these things were practiced, as a result of which when the operation started out, the Israelis were taken totally by surprise. And within the first 4 days of the war, they ended up losing more than 300 odd tanks and a large number of aircraft. Now, when you end up losing 1/3 of your overall tank force in the first 3 days of the war, you can well imagine, by the end of the war, this war lasted for a week or a week plus, they were down with about 800 odd tanks were either damaged or destroyed. And same was the case with the aircraft. But what happened after 3-4 days, the Israelis were able to get their act together. It is their superior technical competence of both the operators and the maintainers, which was responsible for, I won't say recycling, but regenerating close to about 300 plus 300 to 400 tanks, which were returned back into action. A full armored brigade was returned back into action in just 48 hours. Now, imagine what kind of increase in force ratios will take place if such a thing happens. Because the other side is also suffering attrition. It is not only that you are suffering, but if you have planned well and if your personnel are well trained, they are technically competent, you will find that they will create some kind of, bypasses, some measures by means of which they will give back that equipment to you in a acceptable time frame, and that can be used. Similar is the story of the present war. And here you find that, there is a lot of talk about how Ukraine is carrying out innovations in the stride. I'll just recount a few of them. First was, of course, the Russian advance to Kyiv, and where everybody expected that, within the first 3-4 days of the war, the strategic objective of the campaign would have been met. But there are reports which say that approximately 2 brigade worth of artillery kept pounding the Russian columns for full 2 days, and the guns kept firing till they virtually became red hot. This is what is there in some publications. And to be able to fire the guns, to be able to provide the ammunition for that, and to able to look after any kind of breakages, any kind of stoppages which take place, it's a very big job. Next is, of course, the sinking of their flagship Moskva. Operators knew all the vulnerabilities of the system, and then they selected the right kind of a countermeasure to see that all the loopholes which were there in this ship, in the radars and the vulnerable spots, they understood that, and they were able to carry out this operation very effectively, and that created such an impact that today you find that at least in the Black Sea area, there is hardly any activity taking place from the naval side, except possibly a blockade. Whereas earlier there were reports of, launching of another offensive, amphibious landing and things like that from this side also. So this one single act has, made the adversary think and look back that, look, it's better to, scale down your intentions here. Then they have been very effective in creating a kill chain using commercial equipment, whether it is commercial communication equipment, whether it is computing equipment, whether it is drones. And they have rigged up a local, local app, which I believe is called Delta, which is able to fuse all kind of inputs coming from, drones, from satellites, from various interception of communications, and it can fuse this information and give you real-time inputs on where the adversary is, who is there, and then they are able to bring down precision fires, because technologies on their side, they have been provided with, weapons like ammunition like the Excalibur, which is GPS guided. They have been provided with platforms like the MRs, which can, fire accurately to about 80 odd kilometers. So with technology on their side, they have been able to very effectively create this kill chain. And every day you are reading what kind of attrition it is causing. They have to also understand that it is because of the superior technical competence that they are able to handle a diversity of platforms. They have got platforms from all over the Western world. And we know that it is not so easy. We possibly are also operating a very diverse area of equipment in our army, and we know how difficult it is, to moment you graduate from T55 to T72 to T90, how difficult it becomes to manage the skills, to manage the logistics, like support equipment, spare parts, skilled manpower to be able to deliver on ground. So there you find they are handling equipment of German origin, British origin, American origin, something from France, and yet they are able to deliver on ground. We have also seen that this is a great example of data-driven combat. Here, there are ways and means by which they are incubating technologies about which we have been reading. For example, AI, for example, data mining to decide when the battles are required to be changed and how. You have also heard about the drone workshops which have been created by a group of civilian entrepreneurs, of course guided by the military, where commercial drones are being provided, are being hardened with things like encryption, etc., so that it becomes difficult for the opposite side to jam them. Now, speaking about the Russian side, I think one capability which has stood out is their ability in the field of electronic warfare. For a long time, they have, we all have heard that, or we have seen that they have very effective systems, both in the field of air defense as well as EW. And here again, they were able to carry out massive disruption using the power of the beam by jamming Excalibur, by jamming the other guided, precision-guided bombs, and even the drones, because 80% of the surveillance work from the Ukrainian side is done by these commercial drones. They just go pick up, transfer the information, and after that, somebody takes care with a precise precision fire, and that area. So all this indicates, the huge amount of possibilities if your force is technically competent. Now, the level of competence in our military, well, I leave it to you to talk about it. But what I feel is that technical competence is needed in our context, both in the defense industrial base, where our platforms are being assembled and rigged up, or they are being subjected to base refit, and also at the operators level. At both these places, there is a need to scale up uh, this very vital aspect of skills and competencies. First of all, I think every operator, every junior commander and senior leader needs to understand that readiness is complex and readiness is not constant. It will keep degrading with passage of time. So if that is understood, then this whole mindset will change automatically. We have a beautiful scheme which has been which has come under fire from most corners, and that is the Agniveer scheme. I feel this scheme should be utilized to induct as many diploma holders, as many ITIs as possible, both for the operators as well as the maintainers. It will do enormous amount of good in future combat operations whenever the need arises. If we look at this scheme as an opportunity rather than continuously criticizing it for whatever are the perceived drawbacks or limitations. But I feel that presence of diploma holders at the supervisory level and presence of ITI skilled other ranks, both at the weapon platform level and the engineering support level, can be a real game changer in the years ahead. Because what we are witnessing is enormous amount of attrition, and no country will be in a position to carry out, replacements. Even you have heard that Russia is finding out, with such a well-established defense industry base, it is finding very difficult to sustain the daily losses. And you have heard reports of the old version of T-62s and T-55s being now called back to service. At least they are in a position to do it because they have a good industrial base where they'll be able to quickly ramp up readiness and send them forward. In our case, there is no such capability. So whatever innovation, whatever improvisation has to be done in situ, on the spot. And for that, you need technical competence. There are some areas where there has been excessive reliance on simulators. I feel that there has to be a balance which should come in between real live firing and simulators, because ultimately it is the conditions which are prevalent during actual firing in the open and on the simulators. There is a little difference between a synthetic environment and an actual operational environment. We need to incorporate IT and related technologies in a much larger manner, so that we are able to do more with less. Today, you still feel a lot of work, a lot of paperwork is on everywhere. There is a need to cut it down and release manpower for more of operational tasks. We also need to ramp up the skills and competencies of the officer cadre, especially the junior officers, because gradually I find that most of them are turning out to be more managers than specializing in equipment. See, an equipment and officer from the arm must be very well versed on the operational aspect of the weapon platform, the deployment, the capability extraction, and the maintainer must be aware of ways and means of ensuring a certain kind of readiness. If an assault rifle is expected to fire 15,000 rounds at the time of its inductions without any major failure, then I think it's the duty of the maintainer to ensure that as long as it is in service, it is able to deliver this capability or near somewhere around this capability throughout its service. Same is the case with any other platform. Whether you take one of these artillery guns or rocket systems, they must be able to deliver a predictable capability. And this will only come if the people who are handling it understand that, yes, I have to extract this operational capability from it. So we better know about it and initiate measures and keep resources ready so that if such a thing happens, we better look into it and restore the system. So I feel, in the final comment, I will say that there is a need to have a mix of generalist and subject matter experts or engineers in most of the general staff. Today, we find that the handling in general staff is more by people who have a cockpit view or who have superficial levels of knowledge about systems, and they are not in a position to do the job for which they have been placed there. They are mostly there to possibly learn in the stride, because when you come there at fairly senior levels of a colonel and a brigadier and a general, you are reluctant to ask your subordinates about what exactly is this. So there are certain areas where I think has to be a mix, a balance, which has to be restored, which used to be there in previous years. It needs to be restored if this aspect of sustainment readiness is to be taken up seriously.
Thank you, sir. We have generally heard of womb to tomb concept in equipment management. You have moved on to the larger issue of capability readiness. Could you tell us more about this term, life cycle capability readiness? Explain that.
This, see, basically, all along in equipment management, we have talked about this term of womb to tomb concept and things like that. Today, people are talking about life cycle systems management or life cycle capability readiness, where, as I mentioned, that when you carry out a new acquisition, you get a system, it is very important for the acquisition community to clarify from the OEM as to what are the key performance parameters. And in that, it is not only the accuracy or the dispersion or the penetrating capability of the projectile, which is important. It is important to also ask them as to what is the achieved engineering life of this platform. Because what has been seen in this war, either side, is that whatever performance parameters the manufacturers were claiming has not been achieved on ground. And this has to be understood because, last 3-4 decades, the supply of weapon platforms has become more of a marketing exercise. If manufacturer A is able to give me something, manufacturer B will come up and say, I can offer you something which is better than this. So this life cycle capability readiness looks at a cradle to grave view C to G view, and ensures that the capability throughout the service life is maintained. Because today the service life of platforms is increasing. You see, initially, if you look at the Shermans, if you look at the Centurions or the Vijayans, they came in for maybe 2 decades, 3 decades, and then they all got withdrawn. Now you look at whatever platforms have entered after in the early 80s or late 80s, they are still continuing, and the likelihood is that most of them will continue till the turn of this century. I mean, I have no doubt that the T72s and T90s which we have uh, will see service for at least next 30 to 50 years. There is no way you can carry out these replacements because replacements are expensive. The cost of tanks is now touching 70, 80 crores per platform. How many can you carry out? How many replacements can you carry out? So that is why this concept of life cycle capability readiness has to be introduced, wherein you see we were working on the initial portion where we did carry out base refit and we carried out medium refit to restore the capabilities. So the standard was that, okay, whatever capability it had, it must have the same capability after a base refit. Of course, in that itself, there were some dilutions because of perpetual shortages. Now what is happening is the concept of remanufacturing has come, where you carry out technology insertion to see that the capabilities are not only restored, but in some areas they are better than what was there, before the refit. For example, you can bring in more electronics to increase the accuracy of your main armament. You can introduce, some protective measures. You can introduce new radio sets. You can network the whole system. You can bring in condition-based monitoring sensors, mount them on the platform. So all these things are being done to increase the overall capability and the ability of that platform to deliver on ground. And this is the route which we have to follow. There is no point spending 10 crores to 16 crores on a base refit and getting the equipment in the same condition in which you had sent it. With some deviations here, with some areas where still gaps are there. So it is better that these are pre-planned and the technology gets inserted. If you find that there is a vulnerability, the driver needs a new site because the old site, the right site, is already obsolete, well, plan for it and introduce it at the time of refit. If you feel that the engine needs an upgradation because it's not working well in these super high altitude areas, plan for it and introduce that. But all this has to be a planned affair because any technology which you want to insert has to be first mounted, first identified, developed, then installed and tested before you can, actually clear it for serial production. So this LCCR basically looks at all this, and it's a very interesting field because it involves not only the operators, it involves the engineers, it involves the industry, and together they have to work in delivering these kind of upgrades. So up till now, we have not been very successful in this field, and I feel that really, if we want to ensure that strategically we are ready, or this vital aspect of strategic readiness which we are talking about, if at least in the field of military, if we are ready, then we have to pay a huge amount of attention to this business of life cycle capability readiness, because once we look at this life cycle capability readiness, then two important issues will automatically get addressed. One is the ability, which one is called the industrial surge, which is the ability of the national industry to transform itself into a military economy in case a war is thrust upon the nation. So we have to understand that, uh, we are in a difficult situation. The security landscape in the subcontinent is way different from what others are likely to face. And when you are faced with an enemy who apparently, in terms of quantity is more powerful, then you have to innovate and find ways and means of how you will be able to, handle him in the long term. So the ability to create an industrial surge will automatically get activated in case we look at this capability of life cycle capability readiness. The ability to create a maintenance surge in the theater, or what is known as in theater force regeneration, that automatically will get addressed. So if these two vital issues get addressed, at least I feel, as far as the military is concerned, we will be well prepared for any contingencies. Because generally, as far as manpower is concerned, adequate attention is paid, through various initiatives you have. As far as on ground is concerned, a lot of attention being paid to physical fitness, to all the exercises, firing, range firing, etc. So that is being done. So the personal readiness or soldier capabilities is being addressed to some extent. If we had the technical competence portion on that, well, we will be well prepared. The other aspect is to look at platforms and how sustainment readiness can be strengthened and consolidated. If we look at these two aspects, I'm sure this requirement of strategic readiness will be met. There are other issues of operational effectiveness, military effectiveness, which I intend to tackle in subsequent articles when I write. But in this particular article, this is what the message I had to convey. After that, of course, some very concrete steps have also been recommended. It is for the people to read and do as per what they feel is right in the current situation. So finally, I feel, that as I started off by saying that the sustainment readiness component of strategic readiness is a very complex arena, which requires sustained efforts and a lot of investment to keep the warfighting machinery in a ready-to-fight condition. Readiness is not constant, readiness is not permanent, and readiness is quite complex. You see, sometime back, especially after Bosnia and after the Azerbaijan Armenian conflict, there were a lot of comments. People had written the obituary of the tank, saying that tank is no longer required. But the present war has really, thrown up very complex issues. On one hand, everybody has recognized the predominance of technology, that yes, technology is required. Technology can always put you in an advantageous position. But on the other hand, the requirement of mass has again surfaced, that you do need numbers. And when both these two things are needed, the mass is needed and technology is needed simultaneously, then somebody has to plan, somebody has to prepare for it, because it is not going to happen on its own. And in this aspect, I'll say that possibly Russia appears to be better prepared, because despite suffering these massive losses of 1,500 tanks, 2,000 combat vehicles, large number of aircrafts and unmanned systems and all that, and of course manpower, they are still in a position to line up close to 350,000 troops and huge amount of platform in the area which they have occupied. So possibly any other country in such a situation, having suffered casualties, such large casualties and all, will not have in a position to do. But it appears that they are prepared for the long haul. And this is what strategic readiness is all about.
Thank you, sir, for this sharing this article with us, and also coming on to our episode and explaining your article in such great detail, the thoughts which went behind writing the article. Here's the link to General N.V. Singh's LinkedIn profile, as well as his the article are there in the show note below. You are welcome to contact him if you need any further clarification. We welcome you to subscribe our channel if you find our material useful. We look forward to having you back with us in future. Our platform is for MRO professionals, and if you're MRO professionals, you want to join us in any way, please do get in touch with us from one of the links below. Once again, I thank General N.V. Singh for sharing his views with us today. And thank you, viewers, for listening to our episode. Jai Hind.